Greetings everyone, Frogman here, and I'm going to do a little tutorial on how to edit a portrait in mixed lighting in Lightroom. First thing we're going to do is crop. I want a tighter crop, so I use the crop overlay tool. And the nice thing about this is it gives you the rule of thirds, so if you want to compose your photograph more towards the rule of thirds, you can do that. I want to just drag the corners and the sides. It's pretty intuitive. And I want to try and get this left eye close to the rule of thirds little grid area. And I got a soda can and some Kleenex on here that I want to crop out. So I still want to keep the TV and a lot of the Christmas lights in the photo. So that's pretty close. Rule of thirds on my eyebrow. That's close to the eye. I'm going to bring down my top a little here, and we are cropped. Now looking at this, I kind of feel like it's not perfectly straight. I took this a while ago in my old tripod. There was nothing I could do to make it level. Just would not work. So to make it level, click on this ruler adjustment thing here, and you just draw a line, something in the photo that is straight. It's this ruler thingy. Right here, you click that, draw a line, and it automatically straightens the photo for you. So voila, I am now straight. It was only a couple degrees, but we're pretty sensitive to straight lines, and so that can be a bigger deal than you think. So Lightroom is organized in a collection of panels, and you usually start with the basic panel. It's very intuitive in that you can start basic and kind of work your way down as needed. And even within the panels, it works that way too. You kind of start at the top and then work your way down. This photo has a specific problem in that it has mixed lighting. I used a flash to illuminate my face, and a flash has a color temperature of 5500 Kelvin. But the problem is this area in the back is incandescent or tungsten style lighting, and that has a color temperature more around 3000. Now, when I correct the white balance for the background here, which looks to my eyes, I'm in the same room right now, when I look at it, this looks correct. However, you look at me and I'm all blue. So we're going to have to address that at some point. To start out, we're going to go ahead and white balance for me because I am the subject and most important. Great way to white balance portraits of people is to use the whites of their eyes. You want to grab the white balance selector tool here, drag it over to the whites of their eyes. Zooming in to 100% usually helps. And you want to find an area that has very consistent color within that entire grid that's popping up there. So looks like there would be good. So we'll go ahead and click that, and we have corrected the color of me. Now I find sometimes when you do it this way, the tint can be a little off, so you may need to go in and adjust the tint by eye and just kind of do it to a point that looks natural, and I think that looks about right. So sometimes you may feel that accurate color looks a bit sterile, and that's true. A lot of times we prefer skin tones to be warmer and look a little more orangey, but I always tell people to start with accurate white balance because a lot of the adjustments we're going to do later on may affect color saturation and warmth, and they'll do it without adding a color cast. When you try to add warmth back in with your color temperature, it adds a color cast over the entire image. It's like if you took orange saran wrap and put it over top, and it affects all of the tones. So if you can add warmth without putting a heavy color cast in, that is preferable. So like I said, start with accurate color balance, and at the very end, if you still feel like it's a little sterile looking, then adjust your color temperature to warm it up, or cool it down if you feel that's the effect you want to go for. Okay, so we're going to move on to our basic adjustments. Exposure, I feel like I underexpose this just a tad. I'm losing a little detail in the beard and the hair, so I'm going to go ahead and raise that about a third of stop. That's +3. Technically, that'd probably be +3.3, but +3, that's fine. And when I do these adjustments and I need them to be really precise, what I like to do is click in the box, and then I can use my up and down arrows on my keyboard to increase the value just by one increment. And that can give me very precise adjustments. If you're just using your mouse and doing the adjustments, a lot of times it's hard to really zero in, and you can go whoa, whoa, and that's no good. Next up, we have contrast, and this is, in my opinion, kind of a controversial slider. Some people really like contrast, and they turn it all the way up, and they're like, oh yeah, that looks awesome, we got lots of contrast. But I try to rarely use contrast unless I'm doing black and white, and I really need that contrast. For color photos, especially portraits, I want to leave contrast alone, because the next 4 sliders all affect contrast, but they do it in a much more subtle and natural way. First up, we have highlights. Highlights is great for bringing back detail in blown out areas. So I kind of lost some detail in my cheek and forehead here. This light in the back is, pretty intense. So we're going to reduce the highlights. Usually this is going to be a negative adjustment, not a negative value, not like it's really bad or something like that. So I'm going to try and bring back some detail in my cheeks and forehead. I'm not really too concerned about this light back here. It's supposed to be kind of bright and blown out. So that looks pretty good. I brought back some detail and some texture in my cheek and forehead. Next up, we have shadows. And shadows will bring back detail in dark areas. So my beard and my hair here, I've definitely lost a little detail that my exposure adjustment did not take care of. And you'll see later on I'm going to do an adjustment that will definitely need me to raise these shadows. So I'm going to go about there at 33. And this is all to taste. You just kind of move the sliders and just kind of, feel it out, what looks right to you. Next, we have the white slider. The white slider does 2 things. When I reduce my highlights, I made all the whites a bit dull and gray. And increasing the whites will fix that. It's a very small range that it adjusts, just this part of the histogram. So by increasing the whites, I'm not going to blow out any detail. I'm just going to give the whites a kick in the pants. One thing I like to do is, if you click this triangle up here, that shows your highlight clipping, areas where you lose detail. And that can can make sure that you do not push the whites too far and lose detail in important parts of the image. So if I were to go real nuts, turning on that clipping will show, oh, I've lost detail in my cheek. That's pretty bad. So I'll get these red splotches warning me. So the whites adjustment is usually kind of a precise thing. So I'll do my keyboard trick and just do my up arrow one at a time. And I actually want this light to be blown out. So I'm going to do it to where I just have that back to pure white. And then that's going to bring back the tones in my face that got kind of gray and dull. And the other thing the white slider does is warms skin tones and just kind of warms things in general. And it does it without giving a color cast to the image. So like I said before, instead of using the white balance to do that, I'll use my actual white slider, and it will warm things up and give my skin tones a nice natural look. Next up, we have the black slider. Black slider is great for two things. First, it gives you a very natural and a more subtle contrast boost. And it also increases color saturation. Now, you may think, well, why don't I just use the saturation slider down here? But the thing about this is it's kind of like contrast, and it's very heavy-handed. And I find it, especially on portraits of people, it will give your skin tones a very unnatural orangey look to them. So I like to leave the saturation alone. Usually that's more for landscapes if you really want to get vivid skies or greens and flowers and things like that. So instead, to increase my saturation, I'm going to bring down my blacks. Now this does create a little problem for me in that a detail I brought back in my beard and my hair with the shadows adjustment kind of gets lost. But you know what? That's kind of a compromise I have to make, and I can kind of fix that later on with a different adjustment. So it's all just a little bit of give and take, just working the image and kind of kneading it and sculpting it to get the effect you want. And typically what you're going to be fighting is getting the most contrast and saturation while maintaining detail. You got to find that balance. How much detail do I really need? And how far can I push the saturation and contrast before I lose that detail? So that's the balancing act. Next up is the most fun slider in all of Lightroom. It's the clarity slider. This is great for enhancing textures, details, and it can give your image a sharper look. But don't think that if you have an out of focus image or you have some motion blur, that this is going to save you. It's faux sharpening. It's not really meant to save bad photography. It's just meant to bring out detail and texture. So clarity is a selective contrast. It gives you contrast in the areas that really need it. And I don't want to gender it really, but let's say that more masculine faces that do not have makeup, or perhaps elderly faces that have a lot of cool texture and wrinkles and things like that, those are the kind of faces that benefit from boost in clarity. Whereas softer faces, like say babies, or perhaps people who are wearing makeup and they don't want their pores to stand out like crazy, and they want their face to have a softer look, then you would want to leave the clarity slider alone. So in my case, I have very masculine features in my face, and I've got a beard that has cool texture, and my hair's got cool texture. So I definitely want to give it a clarity boost. And, well, clarity is the most fun slider, and you're like, ooh, that's neat. It is also the slider that you can get the most carried away with. So you definitely want to be careful not to overdo it. What I typically do is I will adjust my clarity up until I say, ooh, wow, that's neat. And then I'll look at the value. In this case, 43 is when I went, ooh, that's neat. I'll look at the value, and then I will cut it in half. And then that will bring it to a more natural, subtle adjustment, and that typically works out pretty well. And then people won't go, oh, you added a bunch of clarity to that photo. Again, you don't want people to be able to notice specific adjustments. You want them all to kind of hide behind the scenes. So don't get carried away with the clarity. Vibrance, I don't really need in this photo. Vibrance is better for landscapes with a lot of colors. If you increase vibrance, it'll, again, kind of make your skin tones look a little unnatural. So one thing you can do with vibrance in portraits is if you have kind of a dark and gritty vibe to your photo, if you decrease the vibrance, you can give it kind of a cool, gritty, almost cinematic look, and it gives it that feel of black and white while still retaining some color. So if you don't want to go completely black and white, you have some cool color that you want to show, but you want that feel, decrease the vibrance and see how that works. Okay, so that's pretty much our basic adjustments. In this particular case, I don't really use tone curves. That's mainly for old school Photoshoppers who love the curves adjustment. You can play with it, but these highlights, lights, darks, shadows are pretty much the same thing as the 4 adjustments here. So I'm going to skip tone curve in this particular video. If you, like I said, if you knew how to do curves in Photoshop, then definitely play around with it. Otherwise, you can just do those 4 things in the adjustment panel. HSL, I don't really need to mess with that in this video. I'll probably do a different video in which I make more use of that. Split toning is for hipsters. We're not going to do that. You can get some cool effects, but I don't really do split toning. It kind of makes me feel like I'm using Instagram. Detail, this is an important panel. Now you'll notice Lightroom automatically adds sharpening to your photo by default, and this is because pretty much all modern DSLRs have an anti-aliasing filter, which is a good thing for most of the time, especially for video, but for most things. And what it does is it prevents moire patterns and jagged edges, especially on angled lines. So you want an anti-aliasing filter most of the time on your camera, but it softens your image. It's just the nature of what it does. So to account for that, Lightroom automatically adds in some sharpening. Now, if you feel like you still need some sharpening, or maybe you're printing this, a lot of times printing requires that you boost the sharpening. You can play with these sliders. The amount is the main one you're going to want to play with. Radius increases the halo around the area. Sharpening is increasing the contrast between light and dark areas, and the radius will, oh boy, I'm not explaining this well. Just play with the sliders and you'll see. But for web stuff, normally I find that the default sharpening that Lightroom does is just fine. Noise. Now, I was pretty inexperienced when I took this photo. I was using a flash, and for some reason I still use an ISO of 1600, which on my camera, especially if you look at it 100%, really introduces some noise. Lightroom by default will take care of some color noise for you. If you were to move this color slider down, we'll zoom in to 200%, you can see these colored splotches. And so that's pretty normal for most cameras to have a little bit of color noise. So like I said, Lightroom automatically accounts for that. If you have banding, color banding in your photo, some older cameras have some problem with banding. Lightroom 5 introduced a new smoothness slider, which you can increase, and it will help get rid of that banding. So that's color noise. You usually don't have to worry too much about. Just use the default adjustments. Luminance noise. Luminance noise is kind of like film grain, only not as attractive. It's these little light and dark speckles, especially in the dark areas. And noise reduction is not noise get rid of completely. It's always a compromise. The way it works is it will do some very selective blurring of your image to blend in these speckled bits. But, you know, you blur your image, you lose sharpness. So you only want to do it to a point where you go, oh, that noise is pretty tolerable. You don't, if you do it all the way and get rid of all the noise completely, your image will end up looking, I don't know, kind of like a painting, just real soft, undesirable. Did you hear me burp there? Sorry. That's unprofessional. So when I'm getting rid of luminance noise, oh man, sorry. I just want to do it just enough to where I say, okay, I can stand that noise. And for this picture, and most pictures actually, around 30 is pretty good. The detail and contrast sliders and the noise reduction, I don't find that they do very much. You can play with them and see if they affect your images, but I've never found that they do much of anything. Okay, so I moved my noise reduction to about 30, and that looks pretty good. I can definitely tolerate that noise, and when I zoom out, my picture just kind of looks like, I don't know, it looks clearer, it looks nice. So the noise reduction really helped. Next panel is lens correction, and you're always going to want to go to the lens correction panel. Lightroom has a database of lenses, and it automatically knows their flaws. If it has pin cushion distortion or barrel distortion, it will know, and it will automatically account for that. So my particular lens at 17 millimeters, which I shot this at, which was probably not the best focal length, but you know, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. It has some barrel distortion. So if I hit this enable profile correction, it'll read what my lens is, and it will fix that barrel distortion. Now, if I were shooting wide open at f2.8, my lens has vignetting around the corners, and clicking this would have corrected that as well. But I shot this at f4, the only smart thing I did do in this, and so I don't have any vignetting to fix. Next checkbox is remove chromatic aberration. I always check this. In this particular image, I don't have a problem with chromatic aberration, but you know, I click it anyway just because I want to be absolutely sure. If you don't know what chromatic aberration is, it is color fringing. If you take a picture, let's say outside with some tree branches, and you have some out of focus tree branches in the background of your photo, sometimes they will get kind of a colored halo around them, usually green or magenta. And again, it will know your lens, and you click this button, a lot of times it will remove those color fringing automatically. So that's always a good thing to click, and I find that clicking it never has a negative effect. It only has a positive effect. So you're not going to hurt anything by clicking it. All right, so those are the main adjustments, and now we're going to get into some real specific nitpicky things that I want to fix. The first of which being is I want to fix the white balance of the background without hurting the white balance that I've already corrected for me, the subject in this photo. And I'm going to do this with an adjustment brush. And that's this thing up here. And I click on that. And I'm going to go ahead and start with zeroed out values. And then down here we have the size. I'll go ahead and adjust that with my mouse wheel as needed. Feather I want set to 100. I want a big feather because I want the transition area. That's the area between the adjusted area and non-adjusted area. I want that to be smooth and unnoticeable. So having a large feather will help me accomplish that. So everything inside the circle will be adjusted. Everything in the outer circle will be a gradual tapering off of the effect. So that gives you a nice smooth transition and makes your adjustment much less apparent. Now if I had something that was a solid color, usually objects, more angular things with very defined edges, I could try to use auto mask. But for more organic shapes, people, trees, things like that, auto mask is pretty unreliable. Technology just isn't there to know what is what yet. I think eventually they'll get it, but it works good if I had like a gray cube or something like that I wanted to paint an adjustment on. Auto mask might work, but for my purposes right now, I'm just going to go with a big fat feather. And to see my adjustment that I'm painting on, I'm going to click this box down here that says Show Selected Mask Overlay. And that's just going to give me a red overlay showing where I've painted in my adjustment. And I want to paint in my background. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by just going around the edges of me. I'm going to zoom in to 100%. And I'm going to adjust my brush to my liking with my mouse wheel, or I could use my left and right bracket keys. And I'm just going to start painting in the edges. Now, because I have a big fat feather, I want my adjustment to eat into the edge a little bit. I want it to leak over just a tiny bit, just the feather part. And this doesn't have to be super, super precise, but you want to try and get it, as close as possible without going, way over into here. So I'm just going to paint. And then if the hairy bits, you don't have to be quite as precise. You can paint over some of that. So I'm just going to go around the edges and just take care of this. I know this is real exciting. I apologize. But it'll be over soon. And so just painting that in. And one real nitpicky thing I'm going to do, this monitor is projecting light at a certain color temperature, which this monitor is adjusted to the white balance that's very close to my foreground. So I can skip painting in the monitor. If I were to paint in the monitor completely, it would end up looking real blue when I'm done with this. So I'm going to paint around that and just go down to the edge. Alright, so I've got the edges taken care of, and then I'm just going to quickly draw in the rest of the background. And just this is kind of fun. It's kind of like, I don't know, finger painting. You don't have to be real careful. It's always fun when you can paint with reckless abandon. All right, so we're closing in, getting close. All right, I think that's pretty good. And I'm going to turn off my selected overlay, and just to check to make sure I did this right, I'm going to turn down my exposure slider all the way, so if I missed any spots, it will show me very clearly where I effed up. And I can go ahead and take care of those, and I will bring my exposure back. Okay, so now, since the color temperature is too warm, we need to cool it off. So we're going to bring the temperature down until that looks better. And now I'm in the room, same room, I'm looking at it, and the color temperature that I'm looking at in the room matches what I just painted in here. So I think that's pretty good. I think I missed a few spots up in the hair here. And we'll just take care of those. Maybe a little spot in here. And again, you want to try and do this so that the adjustment is not noticeable. Alright, so we've balanced the color temperature of the background and the foreground, and it looks a lot more like it does in real life. So now we're going to do a few other things with the adjustment brush. First, I want to make my eyes pop. I used a flash, bounced it into the ceiling, and because of that, not a whole lot of light went into my eyes and bounced around and gave them, that cool effect. If I were using studio lighting, my eyes probably would have been a lot more vivid. So to fix this, we're going to create a new adjustment brush. Just click the new here. And I'm going to go ahead and click this little drop-down menu here and go to Iris Enhance. And this is a great little preset that you can use to, I'm zoomed into 200%. And you don't have to be real precise, but just paint in your irises. And one thing to note, if your irises were, like, if one eye was in complete shadow, you couldn't do them both at the same time. You'd have to do them separately. But in this case, I can do them both at the same time. So that's kind of nice. That's kind of a boost, but I want to go a little bit further with it. I want to increase the exposure, just really make them pop. By default, the Iris Enhance preset gives you a little bit of clarity and boosts the saturation. And so that looks kind of cool. Now, if you really want to make your eyes pop and kind of give it that, I don't know, unnatural look, but still, hey, that's neat. For brown eyes, you can move your color temperature to the right, and it'll give a nice amber tone. And if you had blue eyes, you would move the color temperature to the left towards the blue, and that will really give them that cool blue effect. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And if you had green eyes, you could try moving the tint towards the green. But green eyes usually kind of pop on their own just by the very nature. So you usually don't have to do a whole lot to enhance green eyes. So there we go. I've got real vivid brown eyes. Next thing I want to address is the blemishes. I was not having a great skin day, and I want to go ahead and take care of that. And to do that, I'm going to zoom into 100%, that's 1:1, and I'm going to use the spot removal tool. Great little tool. Set it to heal. Size will adjust with our mouse wheel or left and right bracket keys. Feather set to 0, and opacity set to 100. We don't want the blemish showing through the bottom of the adjustment. And pretty simple. You just bullseye your zits, and you want the size to be just a little bit larger than the blemish. Click, and it will sample another area that is similar and get rid of your adjustment. Now, what I like to do is down here in this tool overlay, I set it to auto, and while I have the cursor in the area of the photo, I'll have my little indicators of where the adjustment is, so I can mess with it and fix it. But when I move it off to the side, it will disappear, so I can get an unobstructed view of my spot removal. And that works for all other adjustments. That's a good thing to do. So I'm just going to go through and fix all the blemishes. And you just click, and most of the time Lightroom will do a good job finding an area to sample. That's pretty magic in that way. But on occasion, it will sample an area that doesn't really match. In this case, it used the fold under my eye. That's not really good. So what you can do is you can drag the circle to a more appropriate area, and you can even see a preview of what it's going to look like. And then we'll move it off to the side, and that looks about right there. And so that's a great way to adjust your sampling. Now in this case, it actually picked a spot with another blemish. So I've basically removed a blemish with a blemish, and that's no good. So I'm going to move that circle around. I'm going to get rid of this one. And when you find an area to sample, you want to try to find an area that has similar texture. Like I have some pores around here, so I want to find another area with pores to sample from. We'll do this one here is pretty nasty. And I don't know why it's sampled way over there, but I'm going to move that to about there. Again, I'll move it off to the side just to see how it's doing. Maybe do the little edge here. Again, this is real exciting stuff, but you know, that's what you gotta do. And down here we have a hair area, and if I use a non-hair area, I'll get kind of a bald spot looking thing. So I'm gonna move it around and try to find a place that lines up the hair so it looks a little more natural. And okay. And got some weird things in my eyelid here. No, don't sample from there. Let's try there. And get rid of this other little one. Boom. Got rid of you. Another problem I have is I have a little bit of a unibrow. Don't tell anyone. But I shaved my unibrow and I didn't do it this day. And, you know, it's showing up in my photo here. The one cool thing you can do with the heal tool, the spot removal tool in Lightroom 5, is you can actually paint in an adjustment. You just click and drag and use it like a brush. And you can do all the same functions as before, but you can do it with irregular shapes instead of just circles. So we're gonna kind of get rid of these little unibrow hairs. And I'm going to try to match the textures a little bit. And that looks pretty good. Looks like I have 2 eyebrows instead of 1. Okay, so I think that's pretty good on the spot removal. So we're going to go ahead and click Done. Last thing I want to do is I want to add a custom vignette. I want to make me appear brighter and the background appear darker. And the way I'm going to do that is with the Radial filter tool. This is a great tool, new in Lightroom 5. It does a circular adjustment, which ends up being a lot more natural looking because it's a circle, and circles just kind of have a natural feel to them. So I'm going to start around my nose and just kind of put a circle around me. And then I'm going to decrease the exposure of the background. So I really make me stand out and the background kind of separates from me. I'm getting tired, I'm sorry. And the nice thing about the radial filter is you have this feather which allows you to increase the transition area or decrease it. If you decrease it all the way, you just get a weird circle like that. You want to move it till it looks like a very smooth, natural transition. And I think right around there looks good. And you'll see, if you switch from on and off, it really elevates the picture to another level. And the only problem that has occurred with this is this light back here kind of looks like an unnatural dull gray. Light should be kind of bright and white, and so I'm going to have to go back in with an adjustment brush and just paint in the area where the light is. It doesn't have to be real perfect. And I'm going to increase the highlights and just bring that light back to bright white. So my background is still darkened, but my light looks a lot more natural with that adjustment. And click Done. And I think we have a finished photo. And if you look at the before and after, you can see that's quite a difference. We fixed the colors in the background so they're not radioactive orange. Made my eyes popped. Got rid of blemishes. And I think that's looking pretty good. The only other thing is I did lose the detail in my beard and a little bit in my hair when I turn down those blacks. So I'm just going to paint in some adjustments and increase shadows and maybe the exposure just a tad, just to bring back that detail that I lost. And okay, now we're done, I promise. And you can use a lot of these techniques to fix or enhance your photos and get them looking the way you originally envisioned them in your head. I hope this was helpful. I hope it wasn't too long. And get shooting and get editing and have fun.